Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name is Matt.
And my name is Geerling.
G'day, my name's Wayne.
We are thrilled to have Wayne with us today. Wayne, do you want to introduce yourself for the audience?
G'day, audience. My name's Wayne. I am a professor of instruction at the University of Texas in Austin. As you can probably already tell from the accent, I'm from Australia.
Now, and we're at the Jet Set Conference 2024. Longtime listeners, or maybe even more recent listeners, if you've been with us the past year, you might remember several episodes from Jet Set 2023 in Cincinnati, near the old stomping grounds of Abdullah, who's sitting right over there. We don't have a camera we can turn around, but Abdullah is a great host last year. Jadrian, you have a lot to live up to this year for hosting.
We look at this as it is a team effort. So I do not host it by myself. I get great feedback from all the people on the directors. So directors, editors, advisory board. So Matt, I think you're selling yourself short, even though you maybe haven't contributed as much as you think. We'll put you to work next year, and you can help in the planning process. Trust me, I don't make any decisions alone. Abdullah gets an email about every single decision before I make it, because I get very nervous about making decisions. But Wayne, this is the third one you've been to, right?
Yes, first one was in New Orleans in 2020. What a highlight that was. That was when we first had the social hour, and there were ambassadors in charge of helping the conference delegates get around New Orleans and have a good time. And I took them to the Aussie bar, and there's a famous photo with about 30 people. Abdullah was in there as well. 30 people drinking my favourite beer in Australia, so it was absolutely awesome. Yep, so loved the time and great to be back.
So Wayne, I'll ask you. We'll do a little jet set stuff, and then we got to check in our beers. I will say our beer summary will be very quick when we actually do it. Wayne, so you've been going to Jet Set since pre-pandemic. What is it about a conference like Jet Set that you really enjoy? Like, why'd you come back again? Even though you're not an editor anymore, like what made you come back?
I mean, the official answer is that the quality of the presentations and disseminating knowledge and all that's important, but I think the social aspect is as important. Meeting people, creating networks, having fun, catching up with old friends, making new friends, that's what it's about. Plus, you can also learn about the best things in economics education.
So I'll move to the next part because Matt has actually not had a sip of his beer yet.
I haven't.
So we are drinking. We are at the hotel bar. So we are at we're staying at the Hyatt place, and they have kindly let us sit in the breakfast area to record our podcast for this episode. We've got other breweries and stuff planned, but we felt like this would be a good way to do it. So Matt, if you want to take a drink first, that way you can at least be able to chime in. We are all having the exact same beer. We are having a Devil's Backbone Vienna Lager. I'll let you two tell me how you like it.
Well, I've already drained half of mine, so I can say quite clearly.
You hate it. You hate it.
It's fantastic. It's good. We had 4 beers before. This is easily the best.
Yeah. Should qualify the 4 beers that we have.
Yeah. I had a flight, just for those who are worried about the consumption.
Sorry, I had one normal beer plus a
flight. So we're on the campus of Virginia Tech. I guess I don't know if this is officially the campus, but this is my first time here. I've been in Blacksburg now for a grand total of about 3 hours. Beautiful spot, and thrilled to be here. And fun to meet a bunch of great economics educators and learn about new tactics. And Wayne, is it Geerling? Am I pronouncing your last name right? Yeah. So Wayne Geerling. I think in your intro, you're selling yourself short a little bit, although. I would say superstar educator, well-known, published a lot in economics education, and is currently at UT Austin, but you've been at a lot of other great places. And one question I'd love to ask is, you've taught in Australia for a few years. I'm kind of curious to get your take on how different it is to teach, say, American students versus Australian students, or maybe there's no differences. This is where I really don't know anything. I'm curious on your take.
That's an excellent question. It's one I get asked quite a bit, actually. So I've taught twice in Australia and 3 times in America. I always find it easier to teach in America because you have awesome students, but you have awesome students in Australia as well. But the teaching programs here are better resourced, and also you have less admin. In Australia, you've got to do everything. We have the British system: lecture, tutorial, admin. So you're not a lecturer; you're a chief examiner. You're responsible for everything. And if there's 4 sections in a course, you're responsible for every section. So the entire course belongs to you. It's much easier in America. I mean, the student quality is about the same. The program's a much better resource, but also your time is freed up to do what you want. And there's a massive difference there. In Australia, I would spend 60 hours a week, and probably a third of that was probably admin. Here, it's probably 5-10% would be admin. So yeah, I'll just go a little bit close to the microphone just in case my voice isn't loud enough. So I love it. I mean, I've always preferred teaching in America. If I had to rank the 5 universities I've worked at, the American ones would definitely be 1, 2, 3. The students are great, they're fantastic. I get awesome student attendance, participation's great. And because you've got a good on-campus experience here, then it's easier to teach because it's great being in front of an audience which is full. You don't get that in Australia.
That was a very good segue. We did not prepare any of this. So my next follow-up question was actually campus culture. Because I'm curious, you've been at basically 3 large universities. You're okay if I say where you've been?
Of course.
People can look it up. So he has been at Penn State, he has been at UT Austin, and then also Arizona. And so campus-wise, I know that's always one of the big things when I talk about either from, with international students or people even who teach in Canada, where sort of the college experience, the football games, the tailgates, the fraternities is a big part of our system. What is that like on the instructor side? Sort of, does that change your teaching in terms of recognizing your students have extracurriculars? What are Australian students like? Are they working instead? I would say shed some light on campus culture, student activities, and how that affects you as a teacher.
That's an awesome question. I mean, obviously as an instructor, you try to customize your teaching for your audience. So obviously I change some of the materials. So when I move from campus to campus, you'll change some of the examples so that the students understand that you understand the specifics about their culture. So, Penn State football examples will get changed to Arizona to UT. That's pretty easy, right? So we can go from Nittany Lions to the Longhorns pretty quickly. In terms of the campus culture, there is nothing in Australia. It's horrendous. I mean, it's so sad being at an Australian university and having 20 to 30% students show up to your lecture, and that's an awesome attendance. So I'm at the top getting 20 to 30. Most people are getting 3 or 4 people show up. There's no Greek life, there's no campus life. People don't come to campus at all besides taking exams. So they live at home, they work part-time, and they schedule their university timetable around their work. Whereas I love the fact here you've got Greek life. Now, Greek life can have some insidious elements in terms of hazing and stuff like that, but I love the fact when I leave my building at UT Austin and I walk to the main walkway, there's 4,000 or 5,000 people walk past. You don't have that in Australia. So we're all big class instructors. We love the theatre. We love the pageantry of it all. It's great actually going into an auditorium and having 520 people there. So I love it. I mean, I could not speak highly enough of the American college experience. It's so much better than Australian. And for the students who come here on exchange from Australia, the first thing they ask me is, football games. And these people have never been to college football games. Football games and Greek life. They're so excited about that. So you've got to develop your exchange networks with Australia. You can make a lot more money, guys.
No, that's so it's fascinating. I'm kind of curious. So I'm at a liberal arts college, right? Students have to show up. Like, if they don't show up, there's a note sent to their advisor. There'll be there's literally something called a care report that's sent in. How does a student not show up for the semester, and then what do they show up for the tests, or do they have a friend who tells them here's when the assignments are due? I'm curious of how a student can succeed, quote unquote, succeed in Australia for this topic.
So in Australia, we would typically have lectures and tutorials. So tutorials are like a weekly recitation, which is compulsory, like what they have in Britain, because our system comes from England. So the students will come to the tutorials when they're graded. They'll come to the exams when they're graded. Everything that's not graded, no show.
Okay.
It's really a transactional view of university, and it's such a shame because you pay money, there's no experience, but you get a degree. So yeah, it's not great for the students. Having said that, the students are very smart, but the culture in Australia is not so much to be involved in campus life. It was 20, 30 years ago, but unfortunately it's changed.
So, Jadrian, you and I have talked a little bit about the fact, for me, I taught one time at Susquehanna. I had 37, which was an overload on the 35. And I mean, I was like, wow, this is so many. I'm used to the small classes. For you, that's a small upper level. I'm curious, when you've been in those smaller classes, do you find, I always love the smaller classes because I feel like I could do more and get the different connections. Have you been able to take advantage of that, or was it different students each class so you didn't really feel you got that connection?
So when I've taught first year classes, they've always been 300 up to 800. I actually get more nervous in a smaller class. Large class for me, the emotion kicks in, you see the adrenaline, I love all that stuff. When I teach intermediate level courses, and I've only taught probably 2 smallish ones, and my smallish is probably 50 to 100. You're right. I mean, it's a more intimate crowd. They've already had you as an instructor before. They've got a basic understanding of economics. I find them in some ways easier to teach, and you're right. You can do stuff there that you can't do in first year. First year is as much about crowd control as it is about, learning and all the other stuff. Second, third year, it's like, well, okay, guys, you're mature now anyway. If you don't want to be here, then you wouldn't have enrolled in the course anyway. You can actually do a bit more with assessment. So I like both. I think my natural instinct is probably the first year, but I do like the fact with small intermediate level classes, you can actually do a bit more with assessment.
So I am the exact same. My small classes, and if any of my students are listening, they're going to be surprised. My small classes freak me out. Like I feel like it's a very intimate setting compared to like the big class, and so you sort of have to be in a good mood. You have to create an environment that's welcoming, that they feel connected to you. And so if you're having a bad day, it comes across in a small class. In my big class, I can sort of put a face, even if I have a bad day, I can put a face on. I'm not saying not that I'm fake, but like it's more of an entertainment. Totally. And so it's like I can ignore all the bad stuff and I can just put on my big entertainer face. And so like it's way easier to teach the big class than the small one.
Well, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, it's fascinating though. The idea, what you say about, I don't think it's fake at all. It's just being a professional. None of us go to always have good days, but on the bad days you have to show up and the students are expecting you. You've got to leave that behind for an hour to the best of your ability and just give your students a wonderful experience despite whatever other chaos is going on. So I think that's just being a great professional to be able to do that. So this is fascinating. I'm astounded by that the smaller ones are more nerve-wracking. So who knows? Maybe someday I'll got to figure out a way to take a shot at a 500-person classroom. That sounds fun. But do you have you've been teaching these larger sections. I'm curious. Do you have a favorite topic to teach, or a favorite? Doesn't have to be. If you're like, I don't know about between 3. If you wanted to pick something you really enjoy teaching.
Probably microeconomics, and to narrow it down, probably game theory. It's one of the first topics where the students actually, because in some courses it's a special topic, right? If you've got to teach a truncated 8 or 10 week semester, low level students, you might leave game theory out. But I actually think it belongs. I think students can see the connection between economics and the real world, and they love strategic behaviour. We had a chat earlier on about poker, whether you're talking about poker or nuclear deterrence or lotteries and drafts, strategic behaviour is everywhere, and students love it. And the best students love it, and at that point you can see it crystallise in their eyes. Wow, I think I'm going to be an econ major. And I say to students, listen, this is fun, but you've got to have a good mathematical background as well, because once you go up, it's more about the math rather than the intuition, and I've got to learn to sit closer to the microphone. But the students love it. And I love the pop culture clips in game theory because the students can see how fun it is in the real world, practical applications.
So we'll get to full pop culture later, and maybe this will be the excuse. Curious what pop culture you use for game theory. Yeah. Hey, this is a live studio audience here. So, so I'm curious what do you use for your game theory pop culture?
Okay, so I normally start with a scene from Batman, The Dark Knight, the fairy will it blow up, will it not type. That's a nice precursor at the start.
Brian will love that.
My favourite clip of all time is the Golden Balls episode with Sarah and Steve. I love the fact that this guy, it's obvious he's going to get duped. It's the split steel. And in that game, you've got to convince the opponent that you're going to do the opposite of what you're actually going to do, and he gets screwed over. And I always get the students to vote beforehand, and I don't know whether they're very smart or they're misogynistic, but they always work out that the woman is going to screw him over, and she does. and the jaw drops at the end. I love it. That's my favourite. I show Crazy Rich Asians. There's a paper I worked on with Dirk Mathieu on that film. So there's 3 scenes. The Mahjong scene we use there. There's a Budweiser clip about dominant strategies where the rock is the dominant strategy because the game is actually played with a rock and it's thrown at someone in the head. You can have lots of fun there, lots of fun, and someone's hitting a button behind us. So the good thing about game theory is that there are so many practical applications that you can always update your clips. So Jojo and I have done some work on a Squid Game, so I showed the marbles game from that as well. It's awesome.
So I'm curious, I'm not surprised that game theory is your answer. You have taught a history of economic thought, but I'm going to pivot and go the other side on some of your research too. Do you bring in economic history into your classroom? Because you are an economic historian as well. And I think when you think about applying stuff to the real world, a really great example is look at old historical stuff and say, hey, this is what was going on with the Nazis, and here's how it plays out sort of in economics terms. So maybe you could talk about some of your why economic history, and then maybe even talk about why don't I don't know if you do, but I'm guessing you don't because you didn't say it. Why don't you talk about economic history in your principles class?
Okay, that's a good question. So my PhD is actually in history. So my thesis looked at people who resisted Nazi Germany, so people who committed high treason. I haven't used that research in my teaching. When I teach, there's a chapter on, I think it's recession, depression, and sort of Great Recession. So it looks at 3 different recessions. I use a lot of economic history there, and I think it's really important that students understand that, economic thought is like a pendulum, and it swings over time. It's easy for students to think, well, the way it is now is the way it's always been. If you look back over 150 years, you notice that the pendulum swings a lot, right? So, and the students are fascinated by that because they can see that there's pluralism there. And that's important in understanding. If you don't understand history, then you repeat the mistakes. So I haven't used my own research in my teaching. I would like to at some point, but I do like the idea of exposing students to economic history, particularly the stuff around the Great Depression. You can use the Keynes and Hayek rap videos that were created. In fact, fun fact, one of the creators of Econ TV Stories was a Penn State alumni. I forget his name, but I know he was a Penn State alumni. But they have awesome rap videos, so I use that stuff in class.
So I'm thinking about this in a moment, and maybe Matt, you can chime in on this. I feel like macro has a ton of history in it. I understand why, right? When you think about Great Depression, stagflation, things like that, it's much easier to look backwards and say, here's all the things we did before, and then try to bring it forward and say, okay, well, what does this mean for, going forward? I guess why don't we have as much history in teaching micro? I think price ceilings we talk about the Nixon stuff. I think we briefly mention it, but it always feels like it's more of like an example that we might use that says, hey, we have done this, but we don't do it anymore. So I think about that like when I teach oligopolies and antitrust, I talk about, there is the Sherman Antitrust Act, but I move on really quickly. And I feel like maybe Matt, you can pontificate. Why is there no history?
That's a great question, and I don't know. Thinking through, because there are a lot of topics that would be perfectly great to do that. I often do the poverty, inequality, discrimination section in micro, and there's plenty of econ history that could go through there. There could be, minimum wages and how did they come about, and that certainly could be included. I haven't. Maybe it's. If I had everything, if I had everything I wanted in a class, it would be they have no other classes that semester, and hey, it's 4 sections of me in micro, and so that's probably why. But it's but I think that's probably a shortcoming, at least in my teaching. I'd love to put in a little more in my micro.
My guesstimate would be the macroeconomy is a little bit like a roller coaster, so you've got to understand how it moves over time. So it naturally lends itself to historical examples. With micro, you can actually get away with being purely contemporary. It's like, okay, I've got 18-year-olds in the classroom, let me just use examples that they can relate to now. But you're right, I think with price ceilings, for example, going back to history, in World War II, ration cards were existed. That's a good example of a price control right there. So showing students that this stuff is used historically, I think is important in micro because they're not expecting it. Whereas with macro, you look at the economy over 50 or 100 years, so you probably have to occasionally, I love using old clips occasionally, and they really resonate with students when they're not expecting it, like a clip from the Great Depression. In fact, my favourite clips. No, it's not golden balls. It's actually
You should save it. You should save it. Save it.
Oh, okay.
Save your favorite. You can save your
Yeah,
favorite.
no.
flip
I've just
ball
remembered. I've just
in a few
remembered my
minutes.
favourite clip. I've just remembered my favourite clip. So, okay, lip seal.
Okay, so then my next follow-up section, this will be an easy one for you, and then we could do the pop culture
Okay.
stuff. Something else people don't know about Wayne is he is also an incredibly big fan of Australian rules football. And you are, as far as if I remember this correctly, listen, I'm not gonna be able to name the team, but I know that your favorite team has won championships,
Yep.
and Wayne is such a fan that he has flown from the United States back 4 times to go see his team play. So Wayne, tell us a little bit, I guess, just that experience, just as a what is. I always share that one of the perks of being a professor is I have an incredible amount of flexibility, and so things like this of being able to do that, maybe share a story of one of your favorite trips back, and then what is the perk of being a professor in terms of helping you do that.
And what team?
This might be a very long end to the podcast here. So my football team is Hawthorn, and in my lifetime, the grand finals, which would equate to Super Bowls, we've won 13. So I've been really fortunate. Famous story, my father, who came from the Netherlands in 1955, decided to support the team who won the 1961 grand final. I'm not sure why, and that was Hawthorn. The other team has won 1 grand final, we won 13, so thank you, Dad. So in 2012, which was my first semester at Penn State, we made the grand final. And I spoke to Dirk Mattia, my friend in the US at the time. He said, "Oh, you've got to go back." I said, "What about my students?" He said, just find someone to take a makeup class." I said, okay. I went back, dropped 5K, we lost. Went back 13, dropped 5K, we won. 14, dropped 5K, we won. 15, going for the three-peat, dropped 5K, we won. So 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Meatloaf had 2 out of 3. I had 3 out of 4, so 20K over 4 years, but that was good. And I mean, I always say to my students, listen, whatever you do in life, do with passion. And when you have interest, and given that the universities I've worked at have really strong football programs, or in Arizona's case, more probably basketball, they understand the tribal allegiance, and they respect and love the loyalty. So in each case, it was a hit and run mission. I was there less than 48 hours. I was probably drunk when I arrived and drunk when I left, and yeah, it was a tough trip, but we won 3 flags, so I was happy about that.
That's impressive. That's very impressive. A follow-up, I guess, before maybe we could even go to the pop culture, and I'll start asking, because we've been on the game theory pop culture, if you don't mind me asking you. So you had mentioned before game theory's your favorite. Mm-hmm. We did an episode on game theory, that being your favorite. We will put a link to that in the description for those listening if you didn't catch that. Do you have a favorite game theory pop culture clip that you like to show?
It's gonna be the golden balls. I'm sitting here trying to think if I can be contrarian to Wayne here, and to pick something that's not golden balls, because I think that's just such a huge example. I will say that the one that Wayne was talking about is actually not my favorite. That's the one that
There's a follow-up one.
It's the follow-up one.
Yeah.
So the one that Wayne talked about, that's the one I show first, and then there's Nick and Muhammad is the follow-up one. Yeah, and that's my favorite one.
That's second for me too.
And so one of my favorite things to do, and this is one of the things that it's when I really got into teaching, I started to think, I think in the past, I've always used to show it all the way through. And then I would clip it into pieces, and I would show it where it would just sort of cut off right before they were going to show it, and I would sort of force students to answer questions in between. And so I joke with them every semester, and I know it's going to happen, and I love it because you can see them getting excited and their heartbeats are getting up, and then the screen just goes to black. And they get so mad. And I go, if you have a smartwatch on, look at your heart rate. You've never been this excited for econ. Let me ask you a clicker question. And so one year I actually got them to boo me because I had put this cliffhanger right in the middle of the thing. So my favorite thing is to do the cliffhanger, and then I don't show them the answer. I just keep teaching. I'm like, this is game theory. This is strategic behavior. And they lose their mind. They're like, what are you doing? And I was like, the result doesn't matter at the end. Like the game theory is the talking part. And so I try to play it off. I'm like, that part doesn't even matter. Yeah. And then I click through some slides, and then I come back and I show it to them. Absolutely best clip. Cool. I love doing it.
Did you have a different pop culture you wanted to share, or is that you're good with?
Well, I was trying to think. So we end every episode with a pop culture clip. Usually when they're guests, we say, "What's your favorite one?" And we try to come up with one that sort of matches. I was trying to see if I could come up with an Australian one. I do believe there are some Foster beer commercial clips that I've seen before. So I'm going to say, I'm going to stick with my game theory example, because I already said it, so I don't have another one.
I'll go through one and we'll let you close. So the one that I'll do is easy, and we talked about economic history and got a video that just was released, and the title of it's "Why Is Everyone Still Poor?" and it's looking at Game of Thrones because there's 200 years difference. And the standard of living didn't improve in 200 years. And nice discussion of the Malthusian trap, and also a little bit of a discussion. There's a couple different pop culture clips in that video. Theon Greyjoy was raised by the Starks, and they release him to go back to his dad and talk to him about, hey, let's cooperate. We could both gain. And he has this view of gains from trade. Somebody sneezed. I'm guessing the mic didn't even pick that up, but we all saw it. And so the reaction you're seeing on those watching it on the screen are that. But he wants to cooperate, and the father wants nothing. But this idea of, do you gain your profits by trade and cooperation, or do you gain by plundering? And it's kind of an interesting, so that was kind of a fun video to do. You could check that out. And once again, we will link that in the description. So you had your favorite pop culture that you didn't share. What was it? And I'm going to make sure this is still on.
Okay. Well, just in relation to Australian pop culture, I do know that someone is presenting tomorrow. I think it's Stephen Day on Bluey Economics.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm mildly annoyed with Stephen for not inviting me onto the project, given I'm Australian. And I've watched it, and it is absolutely iconic. So I'm looking forward to that session tomorrow, and maybe I'll be able to force my way onto this team, or at least be a consultant. Favourite pop culture clip? It just came to mind. I had Golden Balls in mind, but no. It's actually the Hudsucker Proxy. And again, this probably taps into economic history as well. So it's during the Great Depression. It's at a period where the markets collapsed, and this guy's about to lose everything, and he's about to jump out the window. And he's invented the hula hoop. No one likes it. It's a rubbish project. It's inferior good. They can't give it away. No one wants it, even at zero. One little kid walks down the street, finds it, does some awesome tricks. He's going to be on American Idol. All of a sudden, the other kids around him go bonkers, and preferences and tastes go off the chart, and it goes from basically being an inferior good, and it goes back beyond its original price and up to about $5. So it's a good example of a massive demand shift, and students like that clip because it's funny, it's ironic, but also it's a perfect illustration of what happens when markets can change pretty quickly. What's in vogue today can go out of vogue pretty quickly, and vice versa. I always say to students, listen, if you can capture the hearts and minds of kids as an advertising executive, you'll never go to business.
That's a wonderful clip. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and go in. I think that is the best econ clip that I show that has no words in it.
Oh, okay.
If you're thinking, I don't think there's a single word in the clip that I show. It's just 2 or 3 minutes, and it's perfect. So when we talk, and I mean, you've had projects on inclusive teaching before, but I think it's very important we think, how are we inclusive to people from all sorts of different backgrounds? Anybody can understand that. There is zero language barrier on that one, so I think that's an absolutely wonderful clip. Jadrian, any final words, or Wayne, any final words? So
I'm happy, and look, the beer's drained, so we're probably finishing at just the right time anyway. But this has been a great interview, guys. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining. Thanks to everybody for watching. Please comment, thumbs up, all of the stuff. Subscribe. We do have Economics Happy Hour stickers. If you would like one, just leave a review. Send us a screenshot. We'll be happy to send that to you. And remember. Cheers. Thanks for joining us, Wayne.
Pleasure, guys.